Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Kottabos Space Program, where today we are having a look at yet another fun mod, this time in the form of Extraplanetary Launchpads. And, well, this mod was originally put together by user Skycooler and is now maintained by forum user Taniwa. And oh dear sweet Jebediah, I cannot believe I haven't actually made a video for this yet. I honestly thought I had. I thought I did this ages ago, but apparently after you do so many mod spotlights, some things get jumbled together, and I missed it somehow. But I love this mod, so now that it has been updated to the most recent 1.0 release of Kerbal Space Program, you know, it's added in some new features, so perfect time to take a look at it. And what Extraplanetary Launchpads does is it adds into the game the ability for you to build your ships away from the Kerbal Space Center. You can build them in orbit, you can build them on other planetary bodies, or even just another section of Kerbin, if you so desire. You can build your ships anywhere, provided you use the right parts to do it. And that is what we're going to take a look at first. Let's jump on into the VAB and take a look at all of the various parts that this adds into the game. And there are quite a few, so we're going to try and do this quick here. So let's grab a random command pod and start by looking at what I kind of consider to be the black sheep of this mod pack. I mean, I honestly do not understand this part. It is a Kerbal rocket workshop, and what it does is it converts metal into rocket parts, which you then use to build a ship with. But I don't think I've ever used this part ever, because there's a much nicer looking workshop down in the utility tab that we'll get to in a moment. It's kind of strange. It looks odd, but it's kind of a legacy part. It's been in the mod for ages, so it just kind of sits there. So let's ignore that and move on to the structural tab, where we find what I consider to be one of the best parts of this mod, and that is the Launchpad 2. And what this baby does is, well, it's a launch pad that you can take to other places. So you aren't just relegated to using that launch pad in the background there. You can deliver this to Duna and then launch rockets from it. And what is quite cool, you can see these nozzles on either side. It does have its own built-in engines, as well as electric charge, monopropellant, liquid fuel, oxidizer, and space for 4,000 rocket parts, which, as I said earlier, is what you use to build these spaceships with this mod. And this is a beautiful part, and you know me, I love animations. A good animation will win me over, and just look at this. You deliver the launch pad to a planet, unfold it, and then bam, there you go. You have a launch pad somewhere else away from the Kerbal Space Center, and it is just beautiful. Now, it does also hold 2 Kerbals. You can pop them right in there, and they will work on your rockets for you. And it is just a really cool part. I love it. By far one of my favorite parts in this whole mod. Let's chuck it back in, though, and head to the utility tab, where we have, oh boy, the vast majority of the parts for this mod pack. And we're going to start out with containers. Now, first, before we take a look at containers, there are several resources that get added in with this mod. You have metal ore, metal, rocket parts, and scrap metal. And all of these have their uses. We'll get into that more in a little bit. I'll go through the whole process. But all of these parts get different containers of various sizes and textures to store them in. And of course, the biggest part that you use all the time with this mod is rocket parts. That's what you use to build all your ships. And so we have these hexcan containers here that come in 4 different size varieties that are there for you to put in a whole load of rocket parts, from the small one that holds 23.1 to the large one which holds nearly 12,000 rocket parts. They are absolutely beautiful, very cool. They store a lot of parts for you. We then have smaller hex cans down here, and they come in metal ore varieties, metal varieties, and rocket part varieties. So down here we've got rocket parts, there's metal ore, and that one is metal. And so they all look the same, barring just slight differences to texturing, and they all come in these various sizes. Now that should be, yes, metal small, metal medium, metal large. Yeah, that should be it for those. So we have these 3 sizes of hex cans, and yeah, these ones will store metal once it's been processed. We then have these ones that store the raw ore before it's processed. And then we have the rocket part ones that will just pop right there that store the final product. Very cool, very useful. The hex cans are interesting. They're not exactly the most beautiful of looking parts, but they serve a very good purpose. They hold a lot of resources inside them, so they are quite useful. Personally, though, for aesthetics, I prefer these containers that it comes with. And again, we have it in metal ore, and rocket part varieties, and they come in 3 sizes of the small, the medium, and oh, never mind. This is the small, that's the medium, that's the large. For some reason, I thought that there was a larger one of these. But yes, there we go, the 3 sizes of this particular container, and this is the one I like, because we got the nice white color for the rocket parts. You've got this sort of metallic blue for the metal, and the sort of rust color for the metal ore. I think it's very fitting. They're very, very nice looking parts, and I do quite enjoy them. So let's just pull these off of here, and now to fill them, we have a new resource system in the game. Now, with the new 1.0 release of Kerbal Space Program, we have a whole new ore system that's been added in. And the Extraplanetary Launchpad used to rely on kethane or carbonite, but now it has integrated itself with the stock system, and we can pull out metal ore out of the ground using these 3 sizes of augers. There is the last one. There we go. So whatever the size ship you have going out there, you can pull metal ore out of the ground using these augers here, and that metal ore is then turned into metal using these smelters. So we have the tiny smelter, the smaller smelter, and then the normal size smelter. They are huge, they are massive. Again, not the prettiest looking models in the world, but they are very functional, and they turn your metal ore into metal, and they also turn scrap metal into metal. So this is one of the containers for that as well. Very useful, very handy. We then have, after you've turned the ore into metal, the metal then must be made into rocket parts. Now, you can either use this weird thing up here, but in utility, we also have this construction workshop. And this baby, oh boy, it has 10 seats for Kerbals to go into. It stores 1,600 rocket parts, and it builds rocket parts out of metal. And it also is a workshop that speeds the construction of the building of ships. And that is something we'll go into more detail soon, but you'll notice here we have a workshop productivity factor of 5. That will be very important in a little bit. Again, I'll go over that once we're on the launch pad. But yes, this is a essential part for making rocket parts, as well as speeding up the construction of your ships. Very good, very useful. I believe that is all for any... Oh, no, one more thing. We have the stake. Now, when you are building ships, you either build it from the launch pad or one of these orbital construction docks, which I also forgot to look at there. And these are where you build your rocket ships or planes or whatever it is you want to build. You build them from this. But if you don't have one of them handy, you can pop down a stake on the ground, and this survey stake can be used to build a much larger, perhaps, rocket at a specific location. Very useful, very handy, and they are put into the ground with a mallet, which is one of the Kerbal inventory system things that gets added in. Yes, this is integrated with the Kerbal inventory system now. There's actually a requirement I probably should add. And the last part, oh god, let me actually just double check that real quick. Yes, the last part that we have is this BG-MGM magnetometer. And now, like I said, we have in this game, now it is put in with the stock ore system. So you have your option of either looking for ore or metal ore for extraplanetary launch pads. And to look for ore, you still use the narrowband scanner. But if you're looking for metal ore, you use this magnetometer. Kind of a weird little model, but a very functional thing. It serves the exact same purpose as the narrowband scanner. It's just looking for a different kind of resource. So that is all the parts. Let's actually go to exit. Yes, don't save that horrible thing. And we're going to go over to the launch pad where I've set up a test rig to explain to you how all the parts function, work together, and how you get from raw ore to rocket parts to a final constructed ship. Oh my god, and I also just realized I forgot to take a look at another part. We have these recycling bins. They come in two sizes, this large one and a much smaller version that's roughly a third the size or so, and that recycling bin is actually used to suck up ships you no longer need, and it will turn them into scrap metal. Very fun, very useful, and a necessity, I would think, because you can help clean up your space by, unused satellites or ships, throw them into the recycler, and you're good to go to use those parts for something else in the future. But yes, so let's now go on to how this all works. Now, of course, you need to start by gathering metal. I've gotten us some already, but let's deploy the auger. We are, of course, at a location that does have some ore, and once deployed, just like the regular standard drill in the stock game, you can just turn this on. It will start pulling up ore, currently at 0.02 per second. That will fill this metal ore container slowly but surely over time, and that is the base resource that you need. You then, let's actually just stop the auger, don't need it wasting power. You then turn that metal ore into metal by using the smelter. Now, we just have a tiny smelter here, and you have two options. The either start metal conversion, and that will take metal ore and turn it into metal. Now, we can stop that and also go down to this button, which will turn scrap metal from the recycler into metal as well. Very useful, very handy. This metal is then used by the construction workshop, if we just hit start part production here, to create rocket parts. You can see it going up, and those rocket parts are going into that container. Very handy, very useful. So that is the supply chain of how things get built in this particular mod. You start with the ore, then turn it into metal, then into rocket parts, and then you can build a ship. But before we do that, I do want to show off the recycler. I've got a little rover there that we're going to eat up. So all you got to do for that is activate the recycler. Currently it's inactive. It is now active. I wish it played a sound or had like grinders in here or something. That would be quite cool, but no, you just have to check if it is active or not. We then can go to our crappy little rover here, which I did strap a magnetometer onto. But yes, that's kind of useful or useless since I'm already digging for metal. And we simply just drive this baby into the recycler to be consumed and turned into scrap metal. There we go, it's just been sucked in. It's now no longer an object in the game, and you'll notice we have scrap metal in this container over here, which we can then turn into metal by the converter. Very good, very useful indeed. As I said, a great way to clean up your space. So like if you have a crap load of satellites you don't need anymore, you can just load a recycler onto the front of a ship and just scoop them up. It's great, I love it. But yes, now to the actual building of ships. So how that is done is you need either an orbital construction dock, a launch pad that we saw in the VAB, or a survey stake, which I have a Barvin Kerbin down there, ready and willing to go with one. But we're just going to show it off here on the orbital construction dock first. And now how you build a ship is either by right-clicking on the dock or the launch pad, and you can click this Show UI, and that will bring up the Extraplanetary Launchpads UI here. You can also, if you have the toolbar mod installed, you can have this little button here which does the same. You can turn it on and off. And the first option that we have here is to select where you want the ship to be built. Now this is very important. Right now we have two of these orbital construction docks. We're currently selected on pad 1. Now you can change the name of these, but I just defaulted it to the 0, 1 designations, etc. And you just click on this. You'll notice that pad 1 is currently slightly highlit as green, and if we go to pad 0, that one down here is now, green highlighting. Very nice indeed. And that is how you select where you're going to build it. Now, if we had a stake in the ground, the stakes would show up here as well, and you would just select that as where you want to build your ship. But we're going to stick with pad 1 because it's nice and convenient on the top here. And the next option right beside it is this green little light here. You use this to turn off and on the highlighting of the part you're building on. I don't know why you'd ever turn this off, because it's quite useful to know where you're building your ship, especially if you have a space station with loads of orbital docks. You need to know where you're actually building said spacecraft, so I always leave that on. The next option here is to choose what you want to build. So you either choose it from the VAB, the spaceplane hangar, or even sub-assemblies. You can grab those as well, and all you do after you have that selected is hit Select Craft. And now we get the ship loader over here, and we can then also change it here, not just with these buttons. I have no sub-assembly, so that's why that's not showing up. And we're going to select the spaceplane hangar and rebuild that little rover that I just destroyed in the recycler. So we'll just grab him, load, and now we have a new little section on the UI showing you what craft you're going to be building, so my generically named rover, what the parts are that it needs, and how many of those parts you need to do it with. Now, right now, this little option here, the 2903.8, is how many rocket parts we have in the entire ship. 260 is how many we need to actually build our rover. And of course, the part we need is rocket parts. Now, this is, once again, integrated with the Kerbal inventory system. And so if you have a ship that has, like, these Kerbal inventory system containers, you can actually populate those containers as well, but you'll need those parts in other containers already to grab them from. So you might have, like, say, a hammer in here as well as a requirement to build the ship. Personally, I never really mess around with that because it's still kind of buggy. I've had a lot of issues with it, so we're just going to build something that requires rocket parts and rocket parts alone. And then all you got to do is hit build, and you see we get this lovely little indicator here showing you how long it is going to take for us to build this ship, which right now it will take, in real-world time, 25 minutes to build this ship with this current setup. And that is determined by a couple of things. Now, remember earlier I said that we had a productivity in this mod, and that the construction workshop was very important for that it had a productivity factor of 5. That is very, very important. And overall, you'll see here, whenever you right-click on any part that has Kerbals inside of it, we have two numbers, a productivity number and a vessel productivity. And what the vessel productivity is the overall productivity of the whole ship. The regular productivity here is the productivity of just that current module you've selected. So you'll notice this whole ship in total has a productivity of 7.7. Not great, that's why it's going to take 25 minutes to build this, but the workshop alone makes up 6.8 of that productivity. Now, we have the hitchhiker storage container, who I've filled with scientists, and that has a productivity of 0.8. The cupola module has a productivity of 0.06. And now that's where things get very interesting. It's not only the part, like I said, this has a productivity factor of 5. The hitchhiker storage container has a productivity factor of 0.4, the science module has a productivity factor of 0.6, and all the manned command pods have a productivity factor of 0.25. And so it's very important what you have your Kerbals in, but also who is in them. The smarter your Kerbals are, the more productive they're going to be. And if you have a really stupid Kerbal, they'll actually be detrimental to the process. So we have Jebediah in the cupola module. That's why we have just 0.06 productivity in that module. So if you want things to go more quickly, you not only want to have better productivity factor containers like the hitchhiker container, the science container, or preferably the construction workshop, but you also want them filled with really smart Kerbals. So the construction workshop not only gets the 5 for the productivity factor of the workshop, but I've also got it filled to the brim with engineers, which increase that even more. And if we had more of these workshops and more engineers in the place, it would stack to make this overall construction time just drop like a stone. Very important, but let us actually just time accelerate. And time acceleration, of course, does affect this. But one thing to note, your vehicles will get constructed during time warps or even while you're away from the ship. So if we went back to the Space Center, the ship would get constructed, but resources don't get refilled, so you better have all the resources you need to build your ship, or else it'll pause. And once the ship is built, you are presented with two new buttons here in the UI, the Finalize Build, which will pop the ship out and you'll then be able to work with it, or the Tear Down Build, which allows you to basically cancel it. You don't want it anymore, you just tear it down, and that is that. But let's Finalize Build, and you'll see we kind of pop out on the camera, and the UI changed to the other pad, because the assumption is, okay, you've built one ship, now you want to build another ship. So that is what you want to do. But we can just go back to the pad 1 from there, or go to the pad 1 from going to the UI button here, and you'll see we have yet another different UI thing. And we have the selected craft is the rover, and it is just a crappy little electric rover, so its only resource is electrical charge. Now this is very important. Whenever you build a ship with this mod, all of its resources will be at 0. And if you build it on a launch pad or one of these docking ports, or construction docks rather, it will be attached to that dock. You can actually see here we have this release button. It is currently still a part of this overall test rig. Once I release it, it will become an independent body. But before you do that, you want to make sure that you have filled up its resources. So of course we only have electric charge, so that got filled quite easily. But if this thing required liquid fuel, we'd also have to fill it with liquid fuel, or oxidizer, or monopropellant, or whatever it is that particular ship needs. You'd have to fill it up, and you have that ability in this UI. So we can actually say that we don't want it to have 100 electric charge, or if, more importantly, if it was fuel, like maybe you built 2 ships, but you've only got enough really to fuel up one, you could give them 50-50 of the fuel split between the 2 ships. It's very handy, very good to have. And but once you do have it all filled up, you just hit release, and it becomes its own independent body, which just got sucked up by the recycler. I did not expect that. I forgot to turn that off. Okay, we'll deactivate that. But yes, once you release it, it's its own independent ship, and you can be on your way with it. Very fun, very useful, very handy. And one last thing before we go. Like I said, you can either construct stuff from the construction dock or a launch pad that you can attach, but you can also do it with stakes. And how that works is it requires the Kerbal inventory system. So I've grabbed some lovely little stakes out of here, and if we open up Barvin's inventory, you can see he has a stake and a mallet, and the mallet is required to put the stake in the ground. And if we just walk over here and hit 1, we can then pop this survey stake into the ground. Now, if we went back to the construction dock, we'd be able to select this stake as a place to build a new ship, and it would build the ship centered over this stake. So it would basically, if it was a lander, it'd be in a circular area around the stake. But that isn't all you can do. If you have multiple stakes, you can actually set them up in like a grid pattern, perhaps. And if you right-click your stakes, you can rename them and change their origin and either be directional or bound. And the origin, you can have this as like the positive X, the positive Y, the positive Z, and the negative X, negative Y, negative Z location of a grid. And you can actually stake out a box for the construction platform to then build your ship inside of. So rather than being centered over the location of a stake, you can have it centered inside of a square of stakes that you've put down on the ground. Very useful, very cool, especially if you're trying to build like a colony with a civilian management mod or a civilian population. You can, build out a nice little grid system and then pop your ships down right in the middle of it, so you know that there won't be anything budging up against each other. Very good, very handy, an absolute wonderful addition to this mod. You gotta love the survey stakes. And who doesn't like giving their Kerbals a little tiny hammer to play with? It's just fun. Look at Bavrin. He loves it. Or Barvin, rather. Barvin. But yes, that is the Extraplanetary Launchpads mod. I love this thing. It is glorious. So go and check it out for yourself. You can do so by taking a look at the link in the description, as always. And yeah, definitely go check it out. It's loads of fun. It is great to build ships in orbit or on other planets. It opens up a lot of possibilities, especially if you're doing some sort of colonization game. Very cool indeed. And there are a lot of other mods out there that have parts that integrate in with this. It's beautiful. So yes, go check it out, and I hope you have had fun on this episode today, and of course that you come back for the next, when we will hopefully be looking at yet another fun mod. But until that time, thank you for watching, my friends, and as always, have a good one.